Long before humanity detected the approaching fleet, the decision had already been made. It did not happen in anger or panic. There were no dramatic speeches or emotional arguments echoing through a crowded chamber. The vote that set the course for Earth's future was quiet, procedural, and to the members of the Galactic Council, entirely routine. The Council had seen civilizations like humanity before. From their perspective, Earth was just another emerging world on the edge of recorded space, an energetic but unstable species beginning to reach beyond its planet. Such civilizations appeared regularly across the galaxy. Most never advanced far enough to matter. But some did. And the Council had learned, through long experience, that the difference between a harmless young species and a dangerous one could be difficult to predict. The first signs of humanity had arrived decades earlier in the form of faint electromagnetic signals drifting through interstellar space. They were weak, scattered transmissions that required powerful listening arrays to detect. Music, fragments of news broadcasts, scientific lectures, military communications, entertainment programs, thousands of small signals spreading outward from a distant yellow star. At first the transmissions were treated as a curiosity. But as more data accumulated, analysts began compiling a profile of the species responsible. Humanity was unusual. The signals revealed a civilization capable of impressive scientific progress. Within a single century, humans had progressed from early industrial technology to nuclear power, digital communications, and spaceflight. They had placed satellites around their planet, sent robotic probes to neighboring worlds, and begun discussing long-term exploration beyond their solar system. In many ways, the progress was remarkable. But the broadcasts also revealed something less reassuring. Humanity was violent. Within the span of a few decades, the species had fought multiple global wars. Their military technologies advanced as quickly as their scientific ones. Nuclear weapons capable of destroying entire cities had been developed before the species even left its home planet. To some Council observers, this combination was troubling. Rapid technological advancement combined with persistent internal conflict had produced dangerous civilizations before. Several Council members raised concerns during early discussions. The species appeared creative, adaptable, and capable of cooperation, but also aggressive and unpredictable. Others disagreed. Violence among young civilizations was common. Many species experienced periods of conflict before stabilizing into more cooperative societies. Humanity's broadcasts also contained evidence of diplomacy, humanitarian work, and international scientific collaboration. There were messages of peace alongside the reports of war. To some observers, that balance suggested a civilization still finding its identity. The debate continued quietly for years while monitoring stations gathered more information. New transmissions arrived regularly as human communication technology improved. Satellite television signals and internet data streams became easier to intercept and analyze. Council researchers studied them carefully. They examined political structures, economic systems, scientific research, and cultural trends. They watched humanity land robots on Mars, construct large space stations, and expand its satellite infrastructure around Earth. They also watched the species struggle with political division, regional conflicts, and environmental challenges. The picture that emerged was complicated. Humanity was not a unified civilization. It was a network of competing nations, alliances, and ideologies sharing the same planet. But despite those divisions, one pattern stood out clearly. When facing major external threats, natural disasters, pandemics, or technological challenges, humans often cooperated with surprising speed. The species had an unusual ability to mobilize large-scale responses under pressure. Some analysts considered that trait encouraging. Others found it alarming. A species capable of rapidly coordinating global action could also adapt quickly during conflict. Eventually, the Council classified humanity as a developing technological civilization with moderate long-term risk potential. Under normal circumstances, such a classification would require nothing more than continued observation. But Earth's location complicated the situation. The human system lay near a region of space containing several established trade routes used by Council member species. Although humanity had not yet developed interstellar travel, its technological growth suggested it might eventually expand beyond its solar system. If that expansion occurred without guidance or oversight, it could disrupt existing political and economic balances. Some Council representatives believed early intervention was the safest option. The concept was not new. In several past cases, the Council had chosen to contact emerging civilizations before they reached interstellar capability. Sometimes the result was peaceful integration into the wider galactic community. Other times the process was less cooperative. Civilizations that resisted council authority were usually subdued quickly by superior technology. The justification was simple: prevent future conflicts by managing young species before they became powerful enough to challenge established order. Not everyone agreed with that approach. A minority of council members argued that premature intervention often caused more harm than good. Young civilizations needed time to mature without outside influence. Humanity, they argued, might stabilize on its own. Its history showed cycles of conflict followed by periods of cooperation and progress. Perhaps given another century, the species would reach space peacefully. But the counterargument was difficult to ignore. Human technological growth was accelerating. In less than 100 years, they had gone from primitive aircraft to interplanetary probes. If that pace continued, humanity might begin exploring nearby star systems sooner than expected. Waiting too long could create a more difficult situation later. Eventually, the council scheduled a formal evaluation session. Representatives from multiple species gathered to review the latest intelligence reports on Earth. Large displays projected summaries of human technological development, military capabilities, and social patterns. One analyst presented a detailed timeline of humanity's progress. Another explained the species' rapid innovation cycles and decentralized research systems. A third described the global communication networks that allowed ideas to spread almost instantly across the planet. The final report focused on human military history. It documented centuries of conflict, including 2 world wars that had involved nearly the entire planet. It showed how human weapons technology had evolved rapidly during those wars, producing innovations that later accelerated civilian scientific progress. To some council members, the pattern was clear. Humanity advanced fastest during conflict. That trait made them unpredictable. After the presentations ended, the council began deliberations. Some representatives supported immediate diplomatic contact. Establishing communication early might guide humanity toward peaceful integration with the galactic community. Others believed the species was too unstable for open contact. Introducing advanced alien civilizations to a divided planet could create internal chaos. Eventually, the debate narrowed to 2 main options: continue passive observation and allow humanity to develop independently, or conduct a controlled intervention to secure the system before the species advanced further. The proposed intervention was limited. A small fleet would enter the solar system, demonstrate technological superiority, and demand compliance with council authority. In most previous cases, such demonstrations ended quickly. Young civilizations rarely challenged forces far beyond their capabilities. Once the situation stabilized, the council could begin long-term negotiations for integration or supervision. The plan was presented as a precaution, not an act of conquest. Its supporters argued that early control of Earth would prevent future conflicts that might involve multiple star systems. Opponents warned that humanity might react unpredictably to such pressure. But ultimately, the majority believed the risk was manageable. Humans had never faced a technologically superior alien force. The shock alone would likely force rapid surrender. After several hours of discussion, the council prepared to vote. Each representative activated a small console, registering their position on the proposed intervention. Across the chamber, lights appeared beside each seat as decisions were recorded. Approve the operation. Delay and continue observation. Initiate diplomatic contact. When the voting system finished counting, the result appeared on the central display. The majority supported intervention. The decision was final. A fleet would be dispatched to the Sol system. Its mission would be simple: establish control of the region and bring Earth under Council supervision before the species developed interstellar capabilities. Within days, preparations began. A task force of 7 ships was assigned to the operation, large vessels capable of extended missions far from established supply networks. 2 logistical carriers would accompany 5 primary ships responsible for direct operations near Earth. To the officers assigned to the mission, the task seemed straightforward. They were not heading into a major war. They were traveling to manage a young civilization that had not yet mastered its own planet. The fleet departed quietly from a distant staging system, accelerating toward the yellow star known in Council records as Sol. Their journey would take years, though advanced propulsion would shorten the travel time significantly. During the long transit, the Council's analysts continued monitoring Earth's broadcasts. Humanity remained unaware that its future had already been decided. Life continued normally on the small blue planet. Cities grew. Satellites multiplied in orbit. Scientists launched new probes toward distant worlds. And every day, billions of human voices continued sending radio signals into space. Signals that the approaching fleet could easily detect. To the Galactic Council, the operation was routine. Another developing species brought under supervision before it could destabilize the region. But they had made one assumption that would prove dangerously incomplete. They believed technological superiority guaranteed control. What they did not fully understand was the species waiting for them. Humanity had spent thousands of years surviving conflict on its own world. It had learned how to adapt under pressure, how to cooperate when threatened, and how to fight opponents stronger than itself. By the time the Council fleet reached the solar system, those traits would matter far more than anyone in that distant chamber had expected. For most of modern history, humanity imagined first contact as a moment of wonder. Scientists expected that if intelligent life ever reached Earth, it would arrive slowly, cautiously. Perhaps as a probe transmitting mathematical greetings, or a distant signal carrying a structured message designed to prove intelligence. The first conversation between species, many believed, would begin with curiosity. That assumption lasted until the morning a radar station in Alaska detected something that should not have existed. The station's purpose was routine, tracking satellites, monitoring debris, and identifying unusual objects entering Earth's orbital neighborhood. Its systems scanned the sky constantly, filtering through thousands of signals every hour. 99% of what it saw were known objects, communication satellites, weather platforms, and fragments of old rocket stages. But this signal was different. The object had appeared far beyond Earth's orbit, moving through deep space toward the inner solar system. At first, the tracking software classified it as an asteroid, which was not unusual. The solar system contained millions of small bodies drifting between planets. Yet within minutes, technicians noticed something impossible. The object was slowing down. Asteroids did not decelerate. In fact, nothing in deep space slowed naturally without a gravitational interaction. There were no large bodies near the object that could explain the change in velocity. Even more strange, the trajectory correction was precise, too precise for natural motion. The operator on duty ran the data again. Then again. Each time the result was the same. Something out there was adjusting its course deliberately. Within half an hour, the station escalated the report to a regional command center. Analysts assumed at first that the system had misread sensor noise or incorrectly processed reflections from distant objects. But when additional radar stations were asked to confirm the reading, the situation changed. They saw it too. And it wasn't alone. By the time observatories in Europe and Asia began pointing telescopes toward the coordinates, 7 separate objects had been identified traveling together. 7 massive shapes moving in controlled formation. Astronomers were the first to visually confirm them. Through high-resolution telescopes, the objects appeared as faint silhouettes against the background of stars. They were enormous, far larger than any spacecraft humanity had ever constructed. Each one measured several kilometers in length, with structures extending outward that did not resemble solar panels or communication arrays. The shapes were unmistakably artificial. Humanity had spent centuries scanning the universe for signs of intelligent life. Now the evidence was moving directly toward Earth. The discovery triggered immediate global coordination, though the public was not informed right away. Governments understood the potential consequences of announcing alien contact without understanding the situation. Within hours, secure communication channels connected space agencies, military commands, and research institutions across the world. For the first time in history, astronomers, physicists, engineers, and defense planners were studying the same problem together. The objects were traveling through the outer solar system at extraordinary speed, but not impossibly so. Their acceleration profiles suggested advanced propulsion, far beyond human capabilities, but still bound by recognizable physics. That detail was important. It meant the visitors were not operating with impossible technology. Their ships obeyed momentum, energy requirements, and orbital mechanics. They were advanced, but not magical. Analysts focused on the ship's trajectory next. If their current course remained unchanged, the fleet would pass near Jupiter within several weeks before continuing toward the inner solar system. Jupiter was not simply another planet along the way. Its massive gravity well made it an ideal location for ships entering the solar system to slow down or change direction. For centuries, human spacecraft had used Jupiter's gravity for slingshot maneuvers. The approaching fleet appeared to be planning something similar. But the precision of their path suggested a different purpose. They were not just passing through. They were preparing to enter the system deliberately. Meanwhile, powerful radio telescopes attempted the obvious first step: communication. Signals were transmitted across multiple frequencies, mathematical sequences, simple pictographic data structures, and patterns that scientists believed would be universally recognizable as artificial messages. Humanity had prepared these transmissions decades earlier for exactly this situation. They were repeated continuously for hours. The alien fleet did not respond. No signals came back. Instead, the ships continued their steady deceleration as they approached Jupiter's orbit. By the time the fleet reached the gas giant, every major telescope on Earth was watching. The ships slowed dramatically as they entered the planet's gravitational influence. Observers expected them to perform a quick maneuver before continuing inward. Instead, they stopped. Or at least, they slowed to the point where they appeared to hold position relative to Jupiter. For nearly 2 days the fleet remained there. That decision confused analysts at first. If the ships were simply traveling through the solar system, stopping near Jupiter made little sense. But if they were conducting reconnaissance, scanning the system, mapping orbital infrastructure, analyzing signals, it was the perfect location. From Jupiter's distance, their sensors could observe Earth's satellites, radio transmissions, and planetary defenses without entering dangerous proximity. In other words, they were studying humanity. The realization spread quietly through the International Coordination Network. These were not explorers stumbling onto Earth by accident. This was a controlled approach. While astronomers continued collecting visual data, military analysts began studying the fleet's structure. 7 vessels were arranged in a loose formation, but their spacing was not random. 2 ships remained slightly behind the others, maintaining distance while smaller objects periodically detached from them. Those objects were soon identified as probes. Small craft launched from the larger vessels and sent in different directions across the solar system. Some moved toward the asteroid belt. Others traveled inward toward Mars. Their behavior suggested systematic data collection, mapping gravitational fields, scanning for technological activity, measuring planetary atmospheres. Humanity had done similar surveys countless times with robotic probes. The alien fleet appeared to be performing the same process, only faster and with far more sophisticated equipment. That pattern provided both reassurance and concern. On one hand, the visitors were behaving logically. They were gathering information before making decisions. On the other hand, they were gathering a lot of information, more than a peaceful diplomatic mission might require. At several points during the observation period, analysts attempted communication again. Radio signals, laser transmissions, and encoded mathematical patterns were directed toward the fleet. Still nothing. No reply. The silence created a strange tension among scientists studying the situation. It was not hostility, but it was not friendliness either. It felt like being observed through a one-way mirror. Eventually the fleet began moving again. After completing its survey near Jupiter, the formation slowly adjusted course toward the inner solar system. That movement confirmed what many analysts had already suspected. The alien ships were not simply passing through. Their destination was Earth. The news finally reached political leadership across the world. Within hours, classified briefings were delivered to heads of state, defense ministries, and international organizations. Humanity was about to experience first contact. But it was not arriving as a message from distant stars. It was arriving as a fleet. Public disclosure became unavoidable. Once amateur astronomers began noticing unusual objects near Jupiter, the existence of the fleet could no longer remain secret. Governments released carefully prepared statements confirming that unidentified spacecraft had entered the solar system. The announcement spread instantly across global media. For millions of people, the news felt unreal. Humanity had discovered alien life. Yet the situation did not resemble the hopeful scenarios many had imagined. There was no greeting, no shared message. Only 7 massive vessels slowly approaching the inner planets. As the alien fleet crossed the orbit of Mars, the scale of the encounter became impossible to ignore. Each ship dwarfed any human spacecraft. Their propulsion systems glowed faintly as they adjusted course with slow, deliberate burns. Astronomers estimated that if the fleet continued at its current rate of deceleration, it would reach Earth's orbital region within several months. That timeline created a strange mixture of urgency and uncertainty. Humanity had time. But nobody knew what the visitors intended. Scientists argued that the fleet might simply want observation or communication. Military planners warned that the formation resembled a tactical approach. Both possibilities existed simultaneously. Humanity had spent generations imagining what it would feel like to know that it was not alone in the universe. Now the answer was clear. It felt complicated, exciting, terrifying, and deeply uncertain. Because for the first time in human history, the question was no longer theoretical. An alien fleet was coming to Earth, and nobody yet understood why. When the alien fleet crossed the orbit of Mars, uncertainty gave way to planning. For several weeks after the discovery near Jupiter, scientists had hoped for some form of communication. Radio signals had been transmitted across every frequency range humanity could generate. Carefully structured mathematical messages were repeated continuously from powerful transmitters across Earth. None were answered. The fleet did not acknowledge them, redirect toward them, or attempt any visible response. Instead, the alien ships continued their measured approach toward Earth. By that point, analysts could calculate their movements with increasing accuracy. The vessels were not wandering through the solar system. Their trajectory was stable and purposeful. They were heading toward Earth's orbital region. The absence of communication created a difficult situation for global leadership. Declaring the fleet hostile without evidence could escalate a misunderstanding. Yet ignoring the possibility of danger would be irresponsible. So governments adopted a cautious but unmistakable strategy. Prepare for the worst while still hoping for the best. Within days, a level of international coordination rarely seen in human history began to take shape. The United Nations established an emergency scientific and defense task force involving representatives from every major spacefaring nation. Agencies that had once competed for funding and prestige now shared information openly. Data flowed constantly between NASA, ESA, Roscosmos, CNSA, ISRO, JAXA, and dozens of military tracking networks. Astronomers focused on understanding the alien fleet's technology. Military planners focused on something more immediate. What could humanity actually do if those ships were hostile? The honest answer at first was not encouraging. Humanity possessed advanced aerospace systems, thousands of satellites, and a sophisticated understanding of orbital mechanics. But nothing in Earth's inventory resembled a true space navy. There were no warships capable of fighting in orbit. No planetary defense grid. No interplanetary missile platforms. Humanity had spent decades exploring space peacefully, assuming that the only threats in orbit were debris and technical failure. Now that assumption was being tested. Still, the situation was not completely hopeless. While humanity lacked dedicated space combat systems, it possessed something equally important: an enormous infrastructure already operating in orbit. Thousands of satellites circled the planet at different altitudes. Communication networks, weather systems, navigation platforms, research stations, and reconnaissance satellites formed a dense technological shell around Earth. At first glance they were civilian tools. But with the right coordination they could also become something else: a sensor network. Engineers quickly began modifying software across satellite constellations. Systems designed to track storms or map agricultural land were reconfigured to detect unusual energy signatures and movement patterns in space. Private companies joined the effort as well. Commercial satellite operators provided real-time telemetry and imaging access to global monitoring centers. Within 2 weeks, Earth possessed something it had never built intentionally: a unified orbital observation network. Nothing entering the inner solar system could move without being seen. Meanwhile, research institutions examined every piece of data gathered about the alien fleet. The ship's propulsion systems were of particular interest. From telescope observations, scientists could detect faint emissions whenever the vessels adjusted their speed. The signatures suggested a form of high-efficiency fusion propulsion or something similar, far beyond human engineering but still recognizable in principle. That detail mattered. If the ships obeyed the known laws of physics, they also obeyed the limitations of physics. They required energy. They required momentum. They required time to accelerate and decelerate. Those limitations meant that even advanced alien vessels could not move instantly or unpredictably. Human analysts began building simulation models. They tested thousands of scenarios. What if the fleet attempted orbital bombardment? What if they deployed smaller landing craft? What if they simply parked in orbit and demanded surrender? Each scenario produced different strategic recommendations. The simulations rarely predicted a clear victory for humanity, but they did reveal something important. The alien fleet would not be able to operate freely without being tracked. Earth's growing sensor network could monitor every movement they made. And in warfare, information often determined survival. While scientists and analysts worked around the clock, governments quietly expanded existing defense capabilities. Early warning radar systems were upgraded. Anti-satellite weapons programs, previously limited and experimental, received immediate funding and testing approval. Several nations accelerated launch schedules for new satellites designed specifically for tracking high-speed objects in deep space. Even civilian rocket companies found themselves involved. Launch providers that normally delivered communication satellites were suddenly transporting new sensor platforms and experimental payloads into orbit. Within a single month, humanity had increased its space monitoring capacity dramatically. The goal was not confrontation. It was awareness. If the alien fleet intended peaceful contact, humanity wanted to understand them clearly. But if the fleet intended invasion, Earth needed time to react. And time depended on seeing the threat coming. As the weeks passed, the alien fleet moved steadily closer. When the ships crossed Mars's orbital path, their formation shifted slightly. 2 of the larger vessels slowed and remained farther back while the remaining 5 continued inward. Astronomers debated the meaning of the maneuver. Some believed the 2 ships might be support vessels, logistics carriers or mobile supply depots. Others suspected they were command ships overseeing the mission. Whatever their purpose, the fleet was now clearly dividing its roles. At the same time, the probes launched earlier from the fleet continued spreading through the solar system. Several passed near Mars, scanning the planet before moving onward. Others traveled toward the asteroid belt, mapping resources and gravitational conditions. One probe even passed close enough to Earth to be detected clearly by multiple satellites. It did not approach the atmosphere or attempt communication. It simply observed. That brief encounter was enough to confirm a disturbing possibility. The probe had detected Earth's satellites, and it had adjusted its path to avoid them, which meant the alien fleet now understood something critical about humanity. Earth was not technologically primitive. It had an active presence in space. The realization likely changed how the fleet viewed the approaching encounter. Back on Earth, the same conclusion was spreading among defense planners. Humanity could not compete with alien technology directly, but it could still influence the battlefield. The solar system itself provided opportunities. Asteroid fields, orbital debris, planetary gravity wells, all of them shaped movement through space. And humans had spent decades studying those environments. The alien fleet might possess superior ships, but humanity knew the terrain. That understanding gradually shaped Earth's emerging strategy. If conflict became unavoidable, humanity would not attempt a direct confrontation. Instead, it would use everything available: information, positioning, and the natural hazards of orbital space. In other words, humanity would fight the way it always had when facing stronger opponents. Carefully, patiently, and with relentless adaptation. As the alien fleet moved past Mars and entered the inner solar system, the situation reached a new level of seriousness. For the first time, the ships were close enough that their shapes could be imaged clearly by space telescopes. Their surfaces appeared metallic but irregular, covered in layered structures that hinted at modular construction. Long protrusions extended from their hulls, possibly sensors, weapon systems, or communication arrays. No obvious markings or symbols could be identified. They were machines designed for function, not display. Each new image was studied intensely by scientists and intelligence analysts. The ships looked less like explorers, and more like warships. No one could prove that conclusion yet, but the evidence was slowly accumulating. Meanwhile, Earth's preparations continued quietly but steadily. Satellites watched. Radar systems scanned. Launch vehicles carried new instruments into orbit almost every week. Humanity had not built a planetary defense system in advance. But faced with an approaching alien fleet, it was building one as quickly as possible. And every day that passed gave Earth a little more knowledge, a little more coordination, a little more time. Because if the visitors approaching Earth truly intended war, humanity planned to be ready. By the time the alien fleet moved past Mars, humanity had accepted a difficult truth. First contact was no longer a theoretical discussion among scientists. It was an unfolding strategic situation. The ships were approaching Earth steadily, maintaining a controlled formation and constant deceleration. They had not fired weapons, issued demands, or attempted communication. Yet their actions suggested preparation rather than curiosity. The absence of intent was, in some ways, more unsettling than open hostility, because it left humanity with only one responsible option: preparation. During the early weeks of the crisis, governments had focused on observation, tracking the alien fleet and analyzing its technology. But as the ships entered the inner solar system, planners began implementing the next stage of defense. Earth itself could not become a fortress overnight. But the solar system offered something nearly as valuable: depth. Space is enormous, even within a single star system. Distances between planets are measured in millions of kilometers. Any fleet moving through that environment must rely on navigation data, communication networks, and supply coordination. Those requirements created opportunities. Humanity decided that if conflict came, it would not wait for the battle to reach Earth. The battlefield would begin much farther out. The first step was expanding surveillance across the entire inner solar system. Earth already possessed thousands of satellites, but most of them were designed to observe the planet below, not the space around it. Engineers began rewriting satellite software almost immediately. Weather satellites were modified to track heat signatures against the cold background of space. Commercial imaging platforms were redirected to watch transit corridors between planets. Even scientific instruments designed to study cosmic radiation were repurposed to monitor unusual energy emissions. One by one, ordinary satellites became part of something larger. A distributed sensor network stretching across Earth's orbital region. Meanwhile, several nations quietly activated systems that had previously existed only as experimental programs. Anti-satellite weapons, originally developed to disable rival nation spacecraft, were suddenly given a new purpose. They would not destroy alien warships, but they might interfere with smaller craft, drones, or reconnaissance probes. Military planners understood the limitations of these systems. A missile designed to intercept a satellite moving at orbital velocity was not guaranteed to work against alien technology. But even a small chance of success mattered. War in space would not be decided by a single powerful weapon. It would be decided by pressure, constant interference, continuous tracking, never allowing the enemy to operate freely. At the same time, private industry became an unexpected part of the defense effort. Commercial rocket companies accelerated launch schedules, placing additional monitoring satellites into orbit. Many of these payloads were simple, clusters of sensors capable of detecting movement, radiation, or electromagnetic interference. Individually they were limited. Together they formed an expanding web of observation. Within 2 months of the fleet's arrival near Jupiter, humanity had increased its space monitoring capacity by nearly 300%. Every movement of the alien fleet was recorded, analyzed, and shared among international command centers. But surveillance alone was not enough. Military strategists understood that if conflict occurred, it would unfold across an environment far more dangerous than most people realized. Orbital space is not empty. It is crowded with debris. Decades of satellite launches, rocket stages, and accidental collisions had filled Earth's orbital region with thousands of fragments traveling at extraordinary speeds. Even a piece of metal no larger than a bolt could destroy a spacecraft if the collision occurred at orbital velocity. Under normal circumstances, satellites carefully tracked these fragments to avoid them. But in warfare, those hazards could become tools. Defense analysts began mapping the largest debris fields around Earth. Old satellite fragments, abandoned rocket boosters, and the remains of previous orbital collisions were cataloged in detail. If alien ships entered Earth orbit, those regions would become extremely dangerous maneuvering zones. The invaders might possess superior propulsion and stronger hulls. But physics still applied. A collision at several kilometers per second could damage any structure. That reality led to the next stage of planning: orbital traffic control. For decades, international agencies had cooperated to track objects in Earth orbit. Now those systems were merged into a unified database shared among military and civilian authorities. The goal was simple: ensure that humanity understood the environment around Earth better than anyone else. The alien fleet might have advanced sensors, but it could not instantly learn every detail of decades of human activity in orbit. Humanity knew where the hazards were. And knowledge of the terrain had always been one of the most valuable advantages in warfare. While these preparations continued, the alien fleet itself began behaving differently. As the ships moved deeper into the inner solar system, they deployed additional probes. These were smaller than the earlier reconnaissance craft but more numerous. Some moved toward Earth directly while others spread outward in wide arcs. Astronomers observed them carefully. The probes did not approach too closely, but their flight patterns revealed their purpose. They were scanning, mapping gravitational variations, measuring electromagnetic emissions, cataloging the thousands of satellites surrounding Earth. In other words, the alien fleet was conducting its own reconnaissance. The two sides were now studying each other simultaneously. Human analysts watched the probe's movements closely. One pattern quickly became clear. The alien craft avoided dense clusters of satellites. Whenever a probe approached a heavily populated orbital region, it altered course slightly, maintaining distance. That behavior suggested caution. The aliens understood that Earth's orbital environment was crowded and potentially hazardous. But it also suggested something else. They were not yet fully comfortable operating inside it. That hesitation became a critical detail in humanity's planning. The alien fleet possessed more powerful ships. But humanity had decades of experience working in orbital space. Astronauts, engineers, and mission controllers had spent generations learning how to navigate the narrow margins of safety above Earth. That knowledge could become a weapon if necessary. As the weeks passed, the alien fleet finally crossed a boundary that many analysts had been watching closely. It entered the region between Mars and Earth where human observation was strongest. At that distance, telescopes could capture high-resolution images of the ships. For the first time, humanity saw them clearly. The vessels were enormous, several kilometers long, with layered hull structures that suggested heavy internal compartmentalization. Long protruding arrays extended from their surfaces, possibly sensors or weapon systems. Some ships carried external modules that looked like detachable pods or support craft. They were not elegant exploration vessels. They were built for durability and operational flexibility. In military terms, they resembled capital ships. Warships designed to operate far from home. That conclusion spread quickly through defense communities across the world. No one publicly declared the alien fleet hostile. But few people still believed the ships were peaceful explorers. As tension grew, the global monitoring network intensified its operations. Satellites tracked every maneuver the alien vessels made. Computer models updated predictions constantly, calculating where the ships would be days or weeks in advance. The approaching fleet could not hide. Humanity watched every movement. Meanwhile, the alien ships began slowing further. Their engines burned steadily as they adjusted trajectories toward Earth's orbital region. The estimated arrival time became clearer. If their current course remained unchanged, the first vessels would reach Earth's vicinity within 3 months. 3 months. In cosmic terms, it was nothing. But for humanity, it was time enough to prepare. And preparation was accelerating. Earth's governments understood that the coming encounter would define the future of the species. If the alien fleet sought peaceful contact, humanity would welcome it cautiously. But if the fleet intended conquest, then the solar system itself would become the battlefield. Not because humanity wanted war, but because humanity had learned something across centuries of conflict. When a stronger enemy arrives, survival does not depend on matching their strength. It depends on refusing to surrender the environment you understand best. And no species in the galaxy knew the space around Earth better than the one that had spent decades living there. For nearly 3 months, the alien fleet advanced toward Earth without incident. From a distance, the approach looked calm, almost slow. The ships burned their engines occasionally to adjust trajectory, then drifted again in careful formation. Their movements followed predictable physics, the same orbital mechanics that governed every spacecraft humanity had ever launched. But the quiet approach did not mean inactivity. Both sides were preparing. Humanity's monitoring network tracked the alien vessels continuously. Every engine burn, every course adjustment, every probe deployment was recorded by dozens of independent sensors. Satellites designed to observe Earth's weather now spent most of their time scanning the darkness beyond the atmosphere. The approaching ships could not maneuver without being noticed. That constant awareness had become the foundation of Earth's strategy. Humanity knew it could not overpower the fleet directly. The alien vessels were simply too large and too advanced. But war was rarely decided by a single overwhelming strike. It was shaped by information, timing, and pressure. If conflict came, humanity intended to make the alien fleet work for every kilometer of space it controlled. As the ships crossed into Earth's outer orbital region, analysts noticed another shift in their behavior. The formation changed. 2 vessels remained farther back, maintaining a distant position several 100,000 kilometers away. The other 5 ships began moving closer to Earth, spreading slightly apart as they approached. It was the first maneuver that clearly resembled a tactical deployment. Military observers immediately recognized the pattern. The 2 distant ships likely served as logistical support or command elements. The forward vessels would perform the primary operation near Earth. Whether that operation was diplomatic contact or something more aggressive was still unknown. But the structure looked unmistakably military. Within hours of the maneuver, Earth's monitoring network detected new activity. Small craft began launching from the forward alien ships. At first they appeared as faint heat signatures separating from the larger hulls. Then radar systems confirmed dozens of individual objects spreading outward from the fleet. They were not probes like the earlier reconnaissance drones. These craft moved with greater speed and coordination. Their trajectories intersected with key orbital regions around Earth, areas where satellite clusters were most concentrated. That behavior triggered immediate concern among defense analysts. If the alien fleet intended to control Earth's orbit, disabling the satellite network would be a logical first step. Without satellites, humanity would lose much of its communication and observation capability. Earth's command centers reacted quickly. Anti-satellite systems were placed on high alert, and tracking networks focused on the incoming craft. Military satellites began transmitting targeting data to ground-based interceptors. But the situation remained unclear. The alien drones were approaching satellite regions, but they had not yet attacked anything. They seemed to be observing, testing, learning how Earth's orbital infrastructure functioned. That uncertainty forced humanity into a delicate balance. React too aggressively, and the situation might escalate into open war. Wait too long, and the alien fleet might seize critical positions uncontested. For nearly 6 hours, the small alien craft continued moving through Earth's orbital space. They passed near communication satellites, navigation platforms, and research stations, recording data with unknown sensors. Several drones even approached within a few kilometers of active spacecraft before turning away. Then something changed. One of the alien vessels moved closer to Earth than any ship had yet attempted. The massive craft began a controlled descent toward high orbit, its engines glowing faintly as it adjusted speed. Its trajectory brought it directly toward the densest region of Earth's satellite network. That movement finally forced a decision. Humanity could not allow an unidentified warship to dominate the orbital space above the planet. The order was given. Tracking systems locked onto the alien ship while several interceptor missiles launched from a remote defense facility. The missiles were not designed to destroy a vessel of that size. Their purpose was different. They would detonate nearby, releasing clouds of high-velocity fragments intended to disrupt sensors and force the ship to maneuver away. It was a warning shot. A message that Earth would defend its orbital territory. As the missiles climbed through the atmosphere and accelerated toward space, every major monitoring station on Earth watched the encounter unfold. The alien ship reacted quickly. Long before the interceptors reached their target, the vessel changed course. Its engines flared brighter, pushing the massive craft sideways relative to its original path. The maneuver avoided the missiles entirely. Moments later, the interceptor warheads detonated harmlessly in empty space. From a purely technical perspective, the alien ship's response was impressive. Moving an object that large so quickly required enormous propulsion power. But the maneuver also revealed something important. The ship had been forced to react. Humanity had successfully disrupted its approach. That brief encounter marked the true beginning of the conflict. The alien fleet did not fire weapons or retaliate immediately. Instead, its remaining ships began adjusting their positions around Earth. The formation widened, spreading across several thousand kilometers of orbital space. More small craft launched from the larger vessels, this time moving faster and with greater coordination. Earth sensors tracked them constantly, but their numbers made interception difficult. Humanity responded in the only way it could. Pressure. Electronic warfare systems activated across multiple satellites, transmitting interference signals toward the alien drones. Military radar arrays locked onto targets continuously, forcing the craft to maneuver frequently to avoid potential intercepts. Dozens of additional interceptor missiles were launched, not to destroy the fleet but to disrupt its movements. The result was chaotic. Alien drones scattered across orbital space, altering course repeatedly to avoid detection or collision. Some retreated toward their parent ships, while others continued their observation runs through satellite clusters. Neither side delivered a decisive strike. But both sides were now clearly engaged in a contest for control of Earth's orbit. For the alien fleet, the mission had become more complicated than expected. Humanity was not technologically superior, but it was organized, responsive, and very familiar with the dangers of operating in orbital space. Every maneuver the alien ships made forced them to consider thousands of moving objects, satellites, debris fragments, and defensive interceptors. The environment itself had become hostile. Meanwhile, Earth's command centers noticed something encouraging. The alien fleet was cautious. Despite their technological advantage, the ships avoided direct confrontation whenever possible. They maneuvered away from interceptors rather than destroying them. They repositioned instead of advancing aggressively. That hesitation suggested the fleet was operating under strict limitations. Perhaps the invaders had been ordered to minimize damage. Perhaps they were uncertain about humanity's capabilities. Whatever the reason, their caution created opportunities. Human analysts updated their simulations constantly, studying how the alien vessels responded to pressure. Patterns began to emerge. The ships were powerful, but they were also careful. And careful enemies could be manipulated. As the first full day of orbital tension ended, the alien fleet had not gained control of Earth's orbit. Instead, it found itself surrounded by a constantly shifting network of sensors, interceptors, and unpredictable hazards. Humanity had not defeated the invaders. But it had done something almost as important. It had prevented them from operating freely. The battle for Earth had not yet truly begun. But the invasion had already become far more complicated than the Galactic Council had predicted. And for the first time since entering the solar system, the alien fleet was facing something it had not expected. A planet that refused to surrender quietly. The first 24 hours of orbital tension did not produce a decisive battle. Instead, they produced something far more dangerous for the invading fleet. Uncertainty. The alien ships had entered Earth's orbital region expecting a predictable response. Most technologically advanced civilizations encountered by the Galactic Council in the past had followed a familiar pattern: panic, disorganization, and rapid collapse of coordinated defense. Humanity had not reacted that way. Instead of concentrating its limited military power in one place, Earth had done something unusual. It had spread its resistance everywhere. Satellites, interceptors, radar systems, and electronic interference created a constantly shifting defensive environment. None of these tools alone could destroy a kilometer-long alien warship. But together they forced the fleet to maneuver constantly. And maneuvering in orbit came with risks. The alien commanders appeared to understand that quickly. During the first phase of the encounter, their ships remained cautious. They avoided direct engagement with Earth's interceptors and kept their distance from dense satellite clusters. But caution came with a cost. Every course adjustment required energy. Every evasive maneuver changed their orbital position relative to Earth, the Moon, and the thousands of artificial objects already moving through space. The more they reacted to human pressure, the more complicated their navigation became. Meanwhile, humanity was learning. Every maneuver the alien fleet made revealed something about its capabilities. Astronomers measured engine emissions each time a ship accelerated. Radar systems analyzed how quickly their trajectories changed. Computer models updated continuously. Gradually, a clearer picture of the alien technology emerged. The ships were extremely powerful. But they were also extremely massive. Changing the course of a vessel several kilometers long required enormous momentum and time. Even with advanced propulsion, the ships could not turn instantly or accelerate without limits. That meant they were vulnerable in a way humanity understood very well. Large objects moving quickly through crowded orbital space could not afford mistakes. Humanity's strategy began to shift accordingly. Instead of trying to threaten the alien ships directly, Earth's defense network focused on shaping their movement. Interceptor missiles were launched not at the vessels themselves, but at positions nearby, forcing the ships to alter their course. Electronic interference disrupted the smaller alien drones, preventing them from mapping the orbital environment accurately. Satellites adjusted their positions constantly, creating dense regions of traffic that complicated the fleet's navigation. Each action was small, individually insignificant, but together they produced constant pressure. The alien ships were no longer moving freely through space. They were reacting. Several days into the standoff, the fleet attempted its first major repositioning maneuver. One of the forward vessels accelerated toward a higher orbital path, possibly attempting to establish a stable observation position above Earth's satellite clusters. At first the move seemed successful. The ship cleared the densest orbital traffic and began settling into a wide elliptical orbit. But the maneuver placed it near something the alien commanders had likely underestimated: orbital debris. For decades, Earth had accumulated fragments of abandoned satellites, rocket stages, and accidental collisions. Most of these objects were small, but they traveled at extraordinary speeds. Under normal circumstances, satellites avoided them easily using precise tracking systems. But the alien fleet did not yet possess humanity's detailed catalog of those fragments. As the vessel adjusted its new orbit, Earth's monitoring network detected something important. The ship was moving dangerously close to one of the largest debris fields in near-Earth space, a cloud of fragments left behind by an old satellite collision years earlier. Human analysts recognized the situation immediately. For the first time since the fleet's arrival, the environment itself presented an opportunity. Command centers quickly transmitted updated tracking information across the global defense network. Interceptor missiles were launched again, not toward the alien ship, but toward positions that would limit its maneuvering options. The goal was simple: encourage the vessel to continue its current trajectory. The alien commanders reacted quickly once they detected the interceptors. The massive ship began adjusting course again, attempting to avoid the perceived threat. But each correction moved it deeper into the debris field. Inside that region, thousands of fragments, some no larger than a coin, traveled through space at several kilometers per second. Even the strongest hull could not ignore that risk. Earth's satellites watched the situation unfold in real time. For several tense minutes, the alien ship fired its engines repeatedly, trying to alter its path. But its enormous mass limited how quickly it could respond. The first collision occurred suddenly. A small fragment, likely a piece of an old satellite panel, struck the vessel at extreme speed. Sensors detected the impact as a brief flash of light. By itself, the collision was minor. But it was followed by another. And another. Inside the debris field, the ship was moving through a storm of high-velocity objects. Human observers could not see every individual impact, but their instruments detected the consequences. Heat spikes along the vessel's hull. Sudden attitude corrections. A series of emergency engine burns. The alien ship was struggling to escape the debris cloud. Several minutes later, a much larger collision occurred. A fragment roughly the size of a toolbox struck the vessel at orbital velocity. The impact produced a bright flash visible even through Earth-based telescopes. Immediately afterward, the ship's engine output changed dramatically. Instead of controlled burns, the vessel began venting energy irregularly. Its rotation increased slightly, suggesting damage to its stabilization systems. For the first time since the fleet had entered the solar system, one of the alien ships was clearly in trouble. The remaining vessels reacted quickly. Two nearby ships altered their course, accelerating toward the damaged craft. Smaller drones were launched, possibly to assess or repair the damage. But the situation had already shifted. The damaged vessel had lost precise control of its orbit. Instead of stabilizing above Earth, it began drifting slowly downward toward a lower altitude, an environment even more crowded with satellites and debris. Human command centers watched carefully. No one celebrated. The situation was too uncertain. But analysts understood the significance of what had just happened. Humanity had not destroyed the alien ship directly. The debris field had done the damage. But human strategy had placed the vessel in that environment. The invaders had entered Earth's orbital space assuming their technology would guarantee control. Instead, they had discovered something unexpected. The battlefield was more complicated than they realized. As the damaged alien ship continued struggling to regain control, the rest of the fleet pulled back slightly, increasing their distance from Earth. For the first time since the invasion attempt began, the alien formation was retreating. Only a few thousand kilometers, but enough to signal caution. Across monitoring stations worldwide, scientists and military planners quietly acknowledged what had just occurred. It was not a victory. The alien fleet still possessed overwhelming technological superiority, but the encounter had proven something critical. They were not invincible. The environment around Earth could harm them. And humanity understood that environment better than anyone else. For the Galactic Council's fleet, the mission had suddenly become far more dangerous than expected. And for humanity, the conflict had reached its first true turning point. The damaged alien ship never fully recovered. For nearly 2 hours after the collisions inside the debris field, the vessel continued struggling to stabilize its orbit. From Earth's telescopes it appeared intact, but its movements were no longer precise. Instead of maintaining a smooth orbital path, the ship made repeated corrective burns, each one slightly mistimed or misaligned. Something inside the vessel had clearly been damaged. Possibly a navigation system. Possibly a stabilization thruster. Whatever the cause, the enormous craft was no longer operating with the same control it had shown when the fleet first arrived. The remaining alien ships reacted immediately. Two vessels accelerated toward the damaged ship, positioning themselves nearby while smaller drones moved around its hull. From a distance it looked like a rescue operation. For the first time since entering Earth's orbit, the alien fleet had been forced into a defensive posture. Humanity watched carefully. Across military command centers, analysts reviewed every piece of data from the incident. Radar recordings, telescope imagery, heat signatures, and trajectory models were examined in minute detail. The conclusion was cautious but clear. The alien ship had not been destroyed by weapons. It had been damaged by the environment. The same orbital debris humanity had spent decades learning to avoid had become a hazard for the invaders. That realization changed the tone of the conflict. Until that moment, most defense planners believed humanity could only delay the alien fleet. Their technology gap was simply too large for any realistic hope of victory. But now a different possibility had appeared. The solar system itself could be a weapon. Orbital mechanics, debris fields, gravitational wells, these were not obstacles for humanity. They were familiar terrain. For decades, engineers and astronauts had navigated them carefully while building satellites and space stations. Every collision risk, every unstable orbit, every gravitational anomaly had been mapped and studied. The alien fleet possessed more powerful ships. But they did not possess that history. They were learning the environment in real time. And real time was dangerous in space. Meanwhile, the damaged vessel's condition continued to worsen. Earth's sensors detected intermittent power fluctuations across its hull. Several external structures appeared partially detached, possibly torn away by earlier collisions. The ship attempted a controlled maneuver to escape the debris field entirely, but its engines did not fire in perfect synchronization. The result was a slow, unstable drift. At one point the vessel rotated slightly off-axis, exposing large sections of its hull to direct sunlight. The glare allowed telescopes to capture the clearest images yet of alien construction. The ship was enormous. Its outer layers appeared heavily segmented, likely designed to contain damage within isolated compartments. Thick structural beams ran along its length, supporting large modules that could be detached or replaced. It was clearly built for durability. But durability had limits. As the damaged vessel struggled to stabilize, the rest of the fleet began adjusting its formation again. Instead of advancing closer to Earth, the ships moved outward. Not a full retreat, but a deliberate increase in distance. That decision did not go unnoticed. For the first time since the fleet had entered Earth's orbital region, the invaders were repositioning in response to human resistance rather than advancing despite it. The invasion plan was changing. Inside command centers around the world, the shift was interpreted cautiously. No one assumed the threat was over. The alien fleet still possessed multiple intact warships, each capable of delivering unimaginable force against Earth if it chose to escalate. But the psychological balance had changed. The invaders had expected a quick and controlled operation. Instead, they had encountered resistance that exploited every weakness in their position. The cost of continuing the invasion was rising. Hours later, another development confirmed the shift. The two ships assisting the damaged vessel began escorting it slowly away from Earth's orbital zone. Their engines burned steadily, guiding the crippled craft toward a higher and safer orbit far above the crowded satellite region. Human tracking systems followed the movement carefully. It was the first clear withdrawal maneuver since the conflict began. Across the global monitoring network, analysts reached the same conclusion. The alien fleet was reconsidering its approach. Perhaps the Galactic Council had expected Earth to collapse quickly under orbital pressure. Perhaps they believed humanity would panic when confronted by advanced alien warships. Instead, they had encountered something different. A species that understood defensive warfare. Humanity had not tried to overpower the invaders. It had simply refused to make their mission easy. Every movement the alien ships attempted had been observed, analyzed, and complicated by human actions. Sensors forced them to hide nothing. Interceptors forced them to maneuver constantly. Orbital hazards forced them to move cautiously. None of those measures were decisive. But together they had transformed Earth's orbital region into something the fleet had not expected. A hostile environment. Days passed while the alien fleet reorganized its position farther from Earth. The damaged vessel remained under escort, its engines firing occasionally as it attempted long-term stabilization. It was still operational but clearly weakened. Human analysts believed the ship would require extensive repairs before returning to combat readiness. For the Galactic Council, that meant the mission had already suffered losses. Not destroyed ships, but damaged ones. Crew injuries, unexpected complications, and most importantly, time. Every additional day spent near Earth increased the risk to their fleet. Human defenses were adapting constantly. New satellites launched weekly. Tracking systems improved. Strategies evolved. Humanity was learning how to fight them. Eventually, the alien fleet established a new position several 100,000 kilometers from Earth. Far enough away to avoid dense debris zones. Close enough to continue observing the planet. But noticeably farther than before. The invasion had stalled. Back on Earth, The news spread quietly through government briefings and scientific reports. The alien fleet had not been defeated, but it had been forced to reconsider. The Galactic Council had approved the invasion of Earth, expecting a simple operation. A young civilization with limited technology should have been easy to control. Instead, they had discovered something their analysis had overlooked. Humanity did not need superior technology to resist. It only needed determination, coordination, and time. The Council had voted to conquer Earth. But by sending their fleet into a complex and dangerous environment they barely understood, they had created something else. A battlefield where their advantages were smaller. A battlefield where every mistake carried consequences. A battlefield where even a powerful fleet could suffer losses. In other words, they had created the conditions for their own failure. The grave the Council had imagined for humanity was still forming. But slowly, unmistakably, it was beginning to look like it might belong to them instead.